I have to say, Hurricane Katrina changed my life forever. We were all breathing sighs of relief that we had been spared, and then the levees started collapsing. "1,800 people who lost their lives in that storm or in the aftermath of the storm because the flooding caught people unawares. It was a tragedy that never needed to happen. My name is Elizabeth English. I'm professor of architecture at the University of Waterloo and the founder and director of the Buoyant Foundation project. I've been working on the Buoyant Foundation project for about 17 years. It started right after Hurricane Katrina, and that's part of the story of the origins of the Buoyant Foundation project. At the time of Hurricane Katrina, I was associate professor for research in Louisiana at the LSU Hurricane Center. I had joined the faculty there because for 25 years I had been doing research in wind effects on buildings. It didn't take me long to realize that, yes, the wind from the hurricane had been an issue, but the flooding was the real issue. The flooding was the big, big problem. I was looking at the situation and realized that I wanted to try to get involved in solution to the flooding. That made me think of how so many people had been forced to leave their homes, and their homes were in disrepair, and they would have to come back and fix their homes. And what the Federal Emergency Management Agency in South Louisiana was telling them was that they had to elevate their houses on stilts or put them up high off the ground so that when another flood happened, they weren't damaged again. And I started to think, well, in the first place, there are lots of reasons why that's not a good idea, having to do with people not wanting to live that far from the ground and disrupting the social interactions that went by that happened on the sidewalks as people walked by. Putting a house up on stilts meant that you had to put in a lot of stairs in order to be able to get up to the house. And a lot of people with mobility issues would have huge difficulty with that. And so I started to think about, well, what about temporary elevation? What about elevation that is activated when the flood is there? What about elevation that is related to floating? What if we could make the house float while the flood is there, and then come back down and be an ordinary house again after the flood water goes away? And so that's what I started working on. One of the things that's changed is that climate change has become a major issue. And with climate change, there's increased frequency and intensity of flooding. So I don't just talk about this as being a solution for flooding, but also as an adaptation strategy for climate change. Could we develop amphibious construction as a way of improving the resilience of First Nations communities to increased flooding from climate change? This research project is supported by a grant from the National Research Council of Canada, and part of their objective was not only to test out physically the concept of amphibious construction, but to begin the process of developing guidelines that could turn into a building code. So with the goals in mind of looking at climate change for Indigenous communities and also development of guidelines, we wanted to test out the concept and in particular, look at the Canadian context, because most of my work had been in warm climates. So part of the testing was to look at freeze-thaw cycles and what that does to the buoyancy materials. So these are all different themes that we tried to work into the experiment. We need to find solutions that don't require migration or relocation, but solutions that can solve the problems of flooding for them at home. The main pavilion itself is basically a dock with the A-frame on top of it. We started calling it the Mama Dock and the 6 Docklings. It has worked out fabulously to be able to do this installation in the research park on the Waterloo campus because of the flexibility. I went to the people in control and said, this is an experiment we want to do and we haven't been able to find a place to do it. Can we do it on stormwater retention pond number 2? And we had no trouble getting the permission to do it on the campus. And the support for research projects is very important. There's enthusiasm and encouragement rather than, well, I don't think that's really going to work. Why should we let you do it here? Well, this research project has been a great opportunity to work with students, and I'm able to hire students to work with me as research assistants and engage in training them to do research. And it gives the students real-world opportunity to get their hands dirty in research. And they literally get their hands dirty and their feet dirty in this project. We do walk out to the pavilion in hip waders to check it every once in a while. And last July, we went out in a canoe to round up all of our wayward docklings that had floated off to the edges and pull them out and photograph them and take observations. The university is obviously interested in expanding research and expanding knowledge. And so is very, very willing to work with us and give us the freedom and the flexibility that we needed to make this installation a success. So it's kind of come full circle now that I'm working with Indigenous people and Indigenous communities and learning about how they see water and how I can adjust and direct my project to be more in keeping with Indigenous ways of knowing and Indigenous spirituality. And that's very meaningful to me, to see this project come back to its starting place in that way.